Hey, Jan.
What's up, Jack? How are you?
Good. Can you hear me pretty clear?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Well, awesome. Thanks for hopping on. I'm welcoming everyone to our Augment Deep Dive live stream on xAI. I believe this is the third AI Deep Dive live stream that we're doing, and the second deep dive into an individual company. For everyone listening, I'm Jack. I handle strategy here at Augment alongside our CEO, Noel. And then obviously I'm here with Jan, who is co-founder and research lead at Sacra. I think everyone knows here that Sacra is, pretty known as the absolute gold standard in terms of private company research, right, Jan?
Yeah, I think so. We, so at Sacra, we do, private markets research, data, revenue valuation, fundraising, all that good stuff. And we publish a newsletter, 3 or 4 times a week with, memos on companies, expert interviews that we've done, that sort of thing. So, check it out, sign up for the newsletter. And
Yeah, awesome. So Jan and the Sacra team have done, a good job pulling some data for us on the freshly launched Grok 4, which we'll jump into. We'll go over kind of xAI's business model and their interesting strategy. And then, I think we're ready to dive into, what I think is the most interesting AI model on the market right now. it's in basically every headline, and it's going to be a good one. So yeah, after that, we can kind of jump right into it. But Jan, thanks for being here.
And thank you for having me. Sweet. All right. So to start, I think a key thing here is kind of the way xAI started. Elon Musk was a co-founder of OpenAI, who left the company, in 2023, stepped off the board, and hasn't had a very high-profile spat with the company, and started his own AI company, sort of in retort. Talked about mission drift at the original OpenAI, and since that, the headcount has gone from something like 30 engineers to over 350, 400 today. And the goal of xAI is similar to the goal of OpenAI, which is to build, the most advanced AI models that can reason across like science, code, real-time events. And xAI has a bit of a premium on this idea of truth seeking, which you see manifest in kind of a lot of the brand around xAI, the personality of its chatbot, some of the safety related programming, as we'll talk about, kind of has driven this slightly edgier persona. But beyond that edgy persona, I think it's a very similar company in a lot of ways to OpenAI and Anthropic. There's a family of large language models sold via consumer subscription through both the X, formerly known as Twitter app, and through the separate Grok app. There's an enterprise API for businesses to use it as an LLM. There's a government-facing business. They just signed a big contract with, DoD to do work for them. So kind of beyond the sort of headlines, there's a very similar-looking business, with some key differences as well. But that's sort of the high level.
Yeah, I think you do a good job of giving a good overview of the company. With Elon Musk at the realm, there's obviously going to be something new, right, with the company that they're trying to do. So he's never going to be doing exactly what everyone else is doing, which is super interesting. And I feel like the tagline, just understands the universe, is just classic Elon. Can you kind of explain what you think that might mean? Because to a reader that doesn't know, like, what does that mean for an AI to understand the universe?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I think, like you said, it's sort of classic Elon, mission-driven thinking. There's been a lot of talk of kind of like bias or censorship with other AI models. A lot of that is like the delicate interplay of like having a product that you can prompt to do or say anything, and also, trying to prevent a political firestorm around people potentially, generating deep fakes of Joe Biden or Donald Trump, saying things, doing things that they didn't actually do. So xAI kind of positioned itself very against, all of that kind of safetyism and censorship, if you will, and with the stated mission of building an AI that is sort of, they say maximally truth-seeking, right, and not going to be sort of constrained by like human preferences around what it should say or what it should do. This is kind of the premise, and that kind of goes to the the acquisition of X as a kind of like training data set for xAI, with this kind of real-time fire hose of like 500 million daily posts streaming into Grok as a source of truth, right? Truth in the sense that this is what people are saying and in real time, what people are concerned with, versus truth as some kind of empirical thing. But I think for Elon, it's largely about this kind of mission, setting them apart from OpenAI and Anthropic, and similar to building SpaceX to go to Mars. It's like building a LLM to uncover deep secrets about the universe, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's super interesting that, I think we'll jump into it a little bit later as well, but just at a high level, that like you said, having that fire hose of real-time data from X allows xAI to really differentiate itself. And, with all of these different LLMs and all these AI models, what we're seeing is these companies trying to, train and use inference to have their data, improve the AI faster than everyone else, right? And so if X is feeding all of this real data into xAI every single day, and they're constantly getting this new data, I mean, we'll see, but it definitely is promising to give them a leg above in terms of the training and inference front. So yeah, I think that's super interesting. And then also, like you're saying with Grok 4 and this new launch, there's a couple of new products in the Grok reasoning, like you see on the slide here, is 10x, right? And so maybe you could jump into a little bit on that and what we're seeing, at the start of Grok 4.
Yeah, so the kind of progression from Grok 2, which was the initial launch, to Grok 3. Grok 3 was kind of, very briefly at the tops of a lot of the leaderboards in terms of benchmarks when it came out, and then it was surpassed, by the next frontier releases from Claude and ChatGPT, and now Grok 4 sort of brought in, this recent paradigm of like reasoning models like ChatGPT o3, Claude 4.5, Sonnet. So Grok 4 was really the first one to take that paradigm and apply it to Grok, and with the much larger kind of GPU compute that they were able to bring to bear on that. So yeah, it's the most. But currently, it's like topping a lot of the benchmarks in terms of ability to perform on these like very challenging human tests, and I think that will be true for at least a little while until we see the next releases from OpenAI and Anthropic, because there is a bit of a revolving door here in terms of who's on top, and this most recent model from xAI is about 100 times larger than GPT-4 originally. It's about 10 times larger than 4.5. So what we're seeing with this most recent Grok 4 model is kind of what happens when you take this reasoning paradigm and apply it, and have a really big model using that. And so it's kind of like o3, but a little bit bigger, Sonnet 4.5, but a little bit bigger, that kind of thing.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And we got a first live question. I love it. What feature of Grok 4 do you think everyday users will notice first? It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you are not someone who's using, ChatGPT and Claude very often, then you might just notice, kind of what it looks like to have a modern reasoning model. If you asked it a complex question, it'll take a little bit longer to get a response, but the quality of the response will be meaningfully higher. And I think it's a big jump to go from non-reasoning to reasoning, right? But if you are more of a AI, connoisseur, then you probably will most be impressed by the voice mode. At least for me, that's what did it for me, was using the Grok app on iOS and using voice mode. It's a much lower latency voice mode than what I've seen from OpenAI, having used their advanced voice mode. It feels more human. There's a few more pauses. I think that was for me the biggest jump, was the quality of the voice mode.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't actually even been able to use Grok 4 yet, but off of what you're saying, yeah, that does sound like it'd be the most interesting, and I'll definitely have to use it, soon here. I think one thing that I've noticed recently with a lot of these models, and a little hack that I've heard that I think is really beneficial for anyone that's listening that maybe isn't super experienced with these models, is they're obviously expanding into the deep research and the larger compute and larger reasoning models. And one way that you can kind of just quickly have an AI give you a better response is just to ask it to use more compute or to think a little bit harder, right? And so I think Grok 4 will do really well in that regard of, instead of just spitting out the first answer it can scrape off of the internet, it'll think a little bit harder, use more compute in order to get you a more correct answer. Or at least that's what they're claiming. So we'll see how that unfolds over the next couple of months. And then, like you said earlier, inevitably someone else will probably top them with a new launch. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. And just one final thought there is, there was a sort of paradigm early on with LLMs where you would say, think step by step, and that would always get you a better answer. And so reasoning models kind of inherently do that. And the other thing about Groks is that they sort of show you all of the thinking steps in between, which you don't always get from a ChatGPT or Anthropic, because they're kind of trying to keep that close to the chest and make it harder for other AI companies to train on their thinking logs. So the fact that Grok always shows you is a cool differentiator.
Absolutely.
But yeah, revenue wise, I think the sort of counterpoint to all of this is xAI is very small compared to the main players we usually talk about. So like Sacra, we have revenue data on OpenAI, hitting 10 billion 10 billion ARR in May this year, and Anthropic hitting 4 billion in June this year. A lot of that is like for OpenAI, a lot of that is from ChatGPT. ChatGPT being kind of synonymous with LLMs for the majority of people. And then Anthropic really having dominance in coding use cases, which has been the biggest B2B driver of AI spend. And so Grok, they're projecting they'll get to 500 million at the end of this year. They were at 100 million at the end of last year. So it just speaks to sort of how much more nascent their business is, and how they haven't really found the sort of key driver of revenue at this point. I mean, we don't actually have great visibility into the split, but because the API is a bit more new, I would say it's most likely that consumer subscriptions are driving the majority of this. So you can access Grok through either getting X Premium or by signing up directly through like the Grok app, which is as of today $30 a month for usage, or 300 for the sort of most advanced models and unlimited usage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, looking at this graph is just insane. But then you compare it to different competitors and it's not, right? So I think something that's super interesting is, their forward revenue multiple is what? I think I did it earlier. It's like 100 and what is it? 160 times their 2025 revenue.
Something like that. 2025. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just
exactly.
insane. Especially compared. Well, I mean, I guess if you compare it to Tesla, it's not that insane. But then if you compare it to the other competitors that are also trading at these just astronomically high forward revenue multiples, it's even higher than theirs. So like OpenAI, I think is trading at what, 90 right now or something. So like their next biggest competitor, who has 10 billion in revenue instead of 500 million, is trading at half their revenue multiple. Like that is very interesting to me. And I think it brings up a really good point just on the revenue front of like, what are investors looking for here, and why do you think they can get away with such a high revenue multiple? Is it simply just Elon Musk's name is attached to it, or is it the fact that it might have the biggest chance because they have all the X data burnt into it? I guess what would be your guess as to why investors are paying this multiple right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I think a big part of it is, we're starting from a much smaller base, but there is a very large kind of distribution opportunity through X. If anyone is sort of going to unseat ChatGPT potentially as like a consumer scale success, I think it would be X. I think the flip side too is that there's this whole Musk empire, right? Tesla, SpaceX, that are potentially sort of other avenues for distribution, but also potentially useful in other ways. You know, one is that the GPU clusters they're building for xAI, become cheaper if you can sort of reuse it for things like Tesla, full self-driving training and that sort of thing. I don't know, speech decoding for Neuralink in the future. So the GPUs sort of become a very big part of the valuation. Because of that potential cross, reuse, but also because, you know, uh, in the worst case scenario, xAI has, one of the biggest sort of GPU clouds on the market, that's worth potentially like 15, 20 billion just on its own right now. So yeah, I think those are two big elements. A third one is, I don't know all the details, but I there was some reporting about the most recent round that valued them at over 100 billion, where there was some very very preferential terms for investors, with kind of like the downside looks more like a debt, but there's equity upside. So where the valuation the multiple maybe looks a little high, but maybe there's some like structural kind of downside protection in there for investors. But yeah, I'd also just have to say, yeah, it's also just Musk. People have a lot of faith in the idea that Elon Musk can like overcome significant technical challenges and figure out ways to monetize his solutions to those challenges very well, which is like a completely earned reputation. Um, and yeah, I think there's also this thought that big companies like Microsoft, Google, etc., they want there to be more competition in LLMs versus like you don't want a world where you're just negotiating with OpenAI and Anthropic.
For
So you
sure.
want more players if you can. If you can see the ecosystem for more, then that's a benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think always having competition is kind of the backbone of a lot of what drives not only just this market but many of the markets, right? So I think it's always good to have that, and I think that'll be a continued theme in the market for a long time, hopefully. I mean, one other thing that I feel like is pretty important to bring up that I'm still a little bit confused on and would love your input on is just kind of the third party AIs or the companies being able to use X's data to train their models. So I think it sounded like they banned some aspect of it, but not the full thing. And so I was curious to see what you thought on that potential revenue stream of letting other AIs use tweets to train their data, but then also keeping it as a moat and keeping it, in house so that they can differentiate themselves from competitors.
Yeah, I think it's a potentially like it's kind of potential upside for them. I mean, again, in sort of I would imagine they would want to keep a pretty tight hold on that data. I mean, even the changes they made to the API, they made it almost impossible for any kind of small to mid-sized startup to build using xAI or sorry the X API because of how expensive it became. I think I would imagine the same thing is happening with xAI, where it's going to be really hard to get access to their data, but it's a sort of potential, it is a potential upside revenue wise, which is similar to how I feel about this question we got from Jameson on LinkedIn about Grok having ads and answers. I think again, it's like something that we've heard they have in the design phase is like sponsored answers, aka ads and answers. I think it's potentially as a way to monetize, monetize like a free user base, which Perplexity is also trying to do. I'm not really sure how that's gone for Perplexity so far, so hard to say. But I know all this stuff is kind of uh, potential revenue upside.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's super interesting to see where they will go with that. I think the ads and the free response or like the free version is definitely a good idea, but we'll see how it gets rolled out. I have no doubt that they'll be able to figure it out though, and make sure that it doesn't, totally reduce the user experience. Yeah, I think we can probably jump right into fundraising now. The real juice that I'm excited for. This is a pretty crazy fundraising timeline. Just from May 2024, I think their valuation has 4x, over 4x since May 2024. So yeah, Jan, you can hop into it here, but that's pretty crazy just right off the top.
Yeah, and we talked about the revenue ramp being very early, hitting 100 million at the end of last year. But I think this is the case. This is almost the case where it's helpful to look at like your safe superintelligence (SSI) or like thinking machines, which is Mira Murati's startup AI lab. Which is now, this was just announced. I think that it's worth $12 billion now.
Yeah, they just
$12
raised
billion.
$2 billion like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, with obviously no revenue there, I would imagine.
Nope.
And safe superintelligence is worth in the upwards of 30 billion. I'm not even, yeah. So you look at those, and suddenly xAI looks a little more normal in that, there's a lot of the valuation is driven a lot by the sort of gravity of the team, the quality of the team, which has been is really top notch. Their ability to quickly attract a lot of people and also acquire a really frontier level amount of GPUs with which to work, which is just evidenced by Grok 4 being Grok 4 now being basically the smartest AI model on the market at this moment. So yeah, I think that's a lot of it. It's just the potential, and yeah, also throw in being able to sort of take really high level senior folks from Tesla, who have worked on AI for a long time and sort of recommission them to work on xAI, I think is another sort of Musk empire benefit that has helped.
For sure. Yeah, I think that the sell or the pitch, I would imagine, I'm not sure if Elon's the one actually in the meetings pitching these VCs and big banks, but I would imagine the pitch is pretty easy. It's, we have the web of all of my different companies, right, that can use each other. Like, I think Grok is going to be in every single Tesla, or 7 million Teslas rolling out here soon. We've got even Neuralink is still around, and he just has so many different little weapons at his utility in order to bring value to his company. And then also, like you said, I think X is one of the biggest social media giants right now, and just having that being the face of xAI basically after the acquisition is just massive, right? So yes, it's going to be about which AI model has the best benchmark statistics, but then it's also going to be who has the consumer grasp, right? It's going to be who has the biggest pull in the media to get people on their platform, because the biggest revenue stream for all these companies is their subscription fees, right? So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to be probably smooth sailing for xAI over the next couple of years, just in terms of the fundraising front. But then there's also, in my opinion, a lot of big concerns that you got to think about as an investor, and something that I look at when looking at xAI is one, the multiple being really high, but then also their latest raise was I think 5 billion in debt, right? And so debt obviously brings in a really interesting aspect into a fundraise. Their debt right now, I believe it's 12% interest, right? I think it's SOFR plus 700 bips, which is I think around 12 to 13%, depending on, because there's a couple of different tranches. And if you're gonna have a $5 billion debt hanging over your head with interest rates where they are and an interest that high, and you're burning $1 billion every month, xAI really is going to have to start making some revenue soon, in my opinion, in order to continue this fundraising and continue to get investors to pay. So a lot of really interesting little things to pull at here with xAI. But yeah, their fundraising has been insane. Got a question from someone. Are there signs that employees or early investors will soon look for liquidity, or is xAI likely to stay private for years with tenders and secondary offerings?
Well, you guys might have better visibility into what employees are doing on the sort of transactional side, but I would say it seems unlikely that they would go public. I know just from looking at Elon's statements about taking SpaceX private or public, it doesn't sound like it's something he's eager to do with any of his companies. And X having just gone private from being public, and the revenue being so sort of unpredictable as it is, it seems unlikely.
For sure.
And some kind of secondary stuff seemed much more likely, although I know like among all the other Musk companies, secondary is typically tough to come by.
Yeah, they're just hard to get because people want them, right? So
Yeah.
I think what we've seen just on the augment side of things is and in the secondary market as a whole is there's been a huge influx of people wanting xAI because of all of the basically because Grok 4, right? Like new model comes out, so many headlines, it's the best model, and investors are really interested in getting a part of that, right? And anything Elon Musk has his name on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting points here with what they could do in terms of staying private or going public. But I think you're right. I think there's a very good chance that they will stay private for a long time, if not forever. I don't think Elon likes as you can probably tell with a lot of different headlines, Elon I don't think likes the regulatory scrutiny that you would get by being a public company and all the reporting requirements. So I would imagine they stay private for a good while longer, but I mean, we will see.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Cool. Yeah. So I think I've sort of talked through the revenue ramp. The revenue looking very different for the main competitors here, but going beyond that, I think a few of the things that we've seen are this proprietary stream of data from X, and a few of the ways in which that's valuable. I mean, on one level, there's just like the fact that OpenAI and Anthropic have trained their models already largely on all of the written content on the internet. Plus, they've manually gone through millions of books and trained on those, and so they're sort of out of data in a way, and getting a feed of data from X that's in real time, is a way around this sort of missing data or running out of data, and that's sort of one big way in which it's useful. Another way is sort of more on the product front, like when you're doing a query to a Grok about some kind of real-time event, asking it about something that just happened, or some piece of news. xAI having sort of ownership of the X stream is a big plus from both like a latency standpoint and an access standpoint. So, there was some tests where folks hit like Gemini from Google for news on recent events, and Gemini has to hit an external API to go retrieve that data via Google searches. So because of that, it takes 4 to 6 seconds to get an answer versus Grok, it's like 2 seconds or under 2 seconds because they have the X data stream indexed. And so that's not a huge difference. But if you think about conversational voice UX, under 2 seconds is much closer to what you need for a human sounding conversation. And then on the other hand, if you look at like a Perplexity, who's constantly scraping the web, and constantly running into these problems where they get sued, by a major publisher or a news site because they're taking their information. It's just like a constant pain and annoyance, and adds cost via these licensing deals. And so by having access to X, you kind of just avoid all that stuff getting in the way. So those are a few big trends there.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's the biggest one for sure. It's pretty obvious that just provides so much value for the company. One other question I had for you. So I saw something that Musk and xAI they claim that they're going to scale from 200,000 to a million GPUs by 2026. I mean, that's multiples bigger than any other of these competitors, right? Like, where is he claiming he's going to get these from? And like, yeah, I mean, Google and Microsoft are struggling with chip supply. Like, why is xAI going to get it? Like, is it Musk's relationships, or do you have any idea there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think you have to weigh in a little bit of like self-driving, fully self-driving cars are coming next year. Um, those kind of claims with Tesla. So to get
True.
from 200K to 1 million is probably, yeah, it's probably a lot. But if I were to speculate, I think a lot of it would hinge on these. Um, you know, they have a great ability to access capital, both through like Elon, through you know. Relationships with Oracle. You got and Tesla in the public markets, and you got SpaceX in the private markets, both generating tons of cash that Elon has no problem sort of putting to bear on xAI. Like, just I think yesterday or the day before there was SpaceX is investing $2 billion in xAI, which obviously as a SpaceX investor, you might be like, why is this happening? As an xAI investor, you're thrilled that Elon is sort of willing to shift capital around in his
And
empire. Um,
yeah, another thing you
yeah,
couldn't do if you were public. So
yeah, exactly. It would be you'd
it'd
have
be much harder
maybe slightly more questions being posed your way.
for sure.
Um, so yeah, I mean, and it just seems like there's a lot of this kind of crazy financing working with sovereign wealth funds. As you mentioned, there's uh, a ton of debt they're using. I would say, if you were going to bet on anyone to be able to financially engineer their way to, having a massive GPU advantage, I think it's worth betting on Elon to do things that maybe publicly traded companies, wouldn't feel
Yeah,
comfortable doing. Which, um, if you believe in sort of scale, like compute scale mattering more than anything else, then that's definitely, a powerful advantage.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll jump into it a little bit later. But it's something to bring up that's important is, you know, the the marketing side of things, not having to spend a bunch of money on marketing. Having Grok one tap away in the main nav bar in every search box on X is a really big sell. But yeah, we can jump right in the business model now.
Yeah, I think it's the closest they're going to get to ChatGPT, which is, sort of Google of AI, who also have very low CAC. I
Yeah,
think putting it in every Tesla, is sort of a nice way to approximate that, and having it on Twitter,
yeah,
obviously.
for sure.
But yeah, I mean, sort of to summarize, I think, and distill a lot of what we've talked about, there's a very big free component of this business. If you are on Twitter as a free user, sorry, X, you can make some use of Grok. It's limited, more tightly limited than a ChatGPT, but you can use it. You can look up tweets, you can look up news, get summaries of events, and this is something they'll potentially start monetizing through ads and that kind of thing. But the main source of revenue right now is these upsells to get rid of your limits, get access to more, more advanced models, including this sort of biggest plan now, as we've seen this trend of these new $200 a month AI subscriptions for OpenAI and Anthropic. Grok now has its own for Grok 4 Heavy, which is kind of like a multiple agent orchestrated model where it's kind of like you ask a question and four agents answer it in parallel, and then sort of compare their answers and give you back the best answer.
It's
So
crazy.
that's what you get for 300 a month. So these are really the main driver. And then, what kind of remains to be seen is, I guess for me, the question is, are they going to be an OpenAI style company where consumer subscriptions are the majority of revenue right now? Or are they looking to be an Anthropic style company where the majority of revenue is from the API,
Yeah,
developers building coding products, which like they are moving a little bit towards this where, serving the Grok API through Oracle. And, they have some business that they've done with, they're doing something with DoD, and they've done things with a few other companies, but that's just a little more nascent. So it'll be interesting to see sort of which direction they go more in.
for sure. Yeah, I think one interesting point on the DoD contract that they just signed, obviously they got it, which is, I was honestly surprised to read that. I assumed, and from what I was hearing, was that xAI might have some struggles with government contracts and defense contracts, just simply due to data privacy with X. And so I was a little shocked to see that. Not super shocked. It's Elon, of course. He pulled through. But do you think that will be something that will be a concern for them moving forward? The data privacy kind of aspect of winning these big contracts, or do you think this contract kind of mutes that point and that they're fine now?
Do you mean data privacy like concern that it's attacked, or like
Yeah.
um
Yep.
yeah, I think potentially. I do think that it seems like well, the last few weeks, the news that we've been seeing about the enterprise deployments with Oracle and some of these enterprise contracts, I think have driven home for me that I think they are building a plenty sophisticated, like um sort of machine that can sell into the enterprise, into government, sell their models into enterprise and into government in a way that they can be also like retrained. So I've seen that some of these enterprise deployments come with open weights so that the models can be retrained. And it's
Got it.
not exactly what's on,
What
it's
I'm
not
using.
exactly the same Grok that's on Twitter,
Yeah.
going crazy in recent days. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like there's a rather sophisticated, go to market and like product, wall between the two to an
Hmm.
extent. And I think also on the contract side, like what I've seen is in federal procurement in general is like the government seems to love, to have options. And so, they'll give contracts to everyone to a degree, and just have them compete and all sort of show what they can do, and try to avoid getting stuck with just one, AI vendor. So yeah.
Got one more little question here. Someone just typed xAI. Don't know if
Nice.
that was a mistake, but the other question was, do you see OpenAI and X merging down the road? Um,
No. Yeah. That is very far down on my list of things I would expect, because
yeah, I don't.
of, yeah, I think, yeah, Elon and Sam Altman, I think, is probably irreconcilable. On the flip side, I do think what might make sense is OpenAI Reddit uh, merger or acquisition, because of how important I think Reddit has now become, with Twitter being locked down completely as a source of data for
Absolutely.
xAI. I think Reddit is the next biggest source of user generated text out there. And Sam Altman used to be CEO of OpenAI, of Reddit. So
Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting take, and I like it. If that comes true, that'd be crazy.
yeah, clip this.
Yeah, clip it. I love it. All right, cool. You want to hop into positioning now?
Oh yeah, sweet. Um, cool. Yeah, I think we've sort of uh, talked around some of this stuff, but I think it's worth it to just think about. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my screen here. Okay, yeah, yeah, data. We've talked about X compute. They have this massive data center in Memphis, Colossus, which is sort of where those 200K GPUs come in. I think one of the biggest kind of, again, bull points in xAI's favor is this velocity that they've gone with. I mean, still a small company, still much smaller than OpenAI and Anthropic, but obviously their vertical integration and this access to capital and compute has helped them move much faster than most of the other AI labs. So they did ship Grok 4 9 months after Grok 3. Now the leading model. I think speed-wise, they're up there, maybe the fastest AI lab in terms of kind of being able to surpass their last, benchmarks and surpass in general, surpass the benchmarks. And I think that the speed, we haven't really talked about the speed yet, so I just wanted to sort of emphasize that. And yeah, I think that's the big thing. I mean, then obviously we can talk about GPU, ownership. I think there's a lot of potentially favorable dynamics there. Like you mentioned the debt stuff. I think there is the potential that as they progress over the next few years, eventually those GPUs are paid, and what they make can be pure margin on top. But again, I think to your point, that sort of rests upon the expectation that they're going to be suddenly making a lot of money. So we'll have to sort of see if that pans out exactly. But yeah, I think that's the theory or the strategy.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think what xAI is doing right now is kind of reminding me of Apple's vision way back when, right? Like own the data, own the hardware, own the whole experience, right? When they were creating all of their different products. And it seems like xAI's little live feed, owning the data, and then, owning the app itself with the LLMs. And it just reminds me kind of that whole experience that Apple and that strategy that Apple took. And so, I'm kind of getting the same vibes there with xAI. And yeah, I think another good point to bring up, like you mentioned, was the GPU capacity. At what point do you see xAI running out spare GPU capacity to others, like kind of the way AWS turned Amazon's excess servers into a business, which is now one of their huge revenue drivers? Do you see them doing that in the near future?
Yeah, I guess to me, not being the world's expert in like semiconductors and GPUs, but I think that over time, there's definitely a chance. Like you want to have your GPUs obviously running at like the maximum utilization rate that you can, and I would say Groks, from what we've seen, are not close to that right now. So
Yeah.
question is, can you eventually get them there? And like GPU clouds like OpenAI and Anthropic rely largely on these like GPU cloud companies like your CoreWeaves, right, and your Crusoes and these companies, which are really trying to maximize to 100% utilization as close as they can. So I think Grok could probably down the line take those kind of off-peak hours, nights and holidays, when the cluster is more idle, and rent that out to other providers. And that could make sense in a way that wouldn't impinge too much on like normal offering of service. Potentially there's a world where in the future we don't need the amount of GPUs that they've built out to sort of provide ongoing service. I mean, who knows what kind of technical breakthroughs we'll have akin to DeepSeek a few months ago, that might open up that kind of business for them. But yeah, I think but if they keep continually training larger and larger models, as quickly as they have, I think that will make it short term unlikely that they'll do anything like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, owning data, compute, and distribution end to end would raise some antitrust risks. So I'm sure. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. We can go on to the next slide here. We got a good question from a user or from a viewer. With metrics moving so fast with models like GPUs, with models and GPUs? Should investors try to keep up with who's on top, or something else like growth? I can kind of answer this one quickly. I think Jan said it very well earlier. Chasing just whoever has the top metrics is definitely going to be interesting. And while it can be a good idea, I think what really investors should be looking for, in my opinion, obviously do your own research, is the companies that have something that differentiates themselves, right? So like, for example, xAI, we're obviously diving deep into them right now. They have the data moat and, the no marketing spend moat. There's characteristics like this for every single AI company out there. And so, we're obviously kind of selling xAI right now because we're diving super deep into them. But then there's also a lot of companies that have, their own little strategic upside, little back pocket tricks, right? So I think you should not just chase the one with the highest, test scores. You should be chasing what you think has the highest upside with, a bunch of different research on, potential markets expanding and, different ways these companies can monetize different avenues. So that's my little answer to that question.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I would agree with everything you said. Cool. And yeah, just I guess here, sort of going back to some of the points we've touched on a little bit, but upside for Grok, I think one of the really interesting things we're gonna see to monitor will be kind of the ways that Elon and xAI can dog food various parts of the Grok xAI ecosystem into their other companies in the empire. In terms of cross sell, I think into the other parts of into like Starlink and Tesla, I think will be interesting. They're working on sort of this. They have this Grok Mini, model, which is something that is a very small model with very low latency. And what we've seen or heard about is sort of talking about running it for Starlink, being able to run, this kind of distilled mini model and give access to LLMs to folks in really remote environments. So if you're on a mining operation in an extremely rural area, or on a boat in the middle of the ocean, something like a very small model at the edge, very low latency, being delivered through satellite. It's a very interesting kind of application of Grok through these other companies in the Musk empire. And there's also kind of reportedly SpaceX is using Grok to kind of summarize telemetry logs. You got Tesla is using it to sort of do the invoice or in-car AI voice, so you can talk to it while you're driving, that kind of thing. So those things will be really interesting to monitor as a potential investor, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's anything, I don't know if there already is, but do you think there's anything gonna be coming out soon or at any point about Grok with Neuralink? Is there any way to spin those two together? I feel like that'd be some sci-fi, little movie, but it could be interesting if they do something.
I think, I think if you advance forward, clip this, but if you advance forward like 20, 30 years, I feel like that feels like maybe the most kind of true to the Elon vision as far as a crossover collaboration. The idea of having an AI, implant in your head, helping you. I don't even know, helping you look up facts in your head while you're thinking. It's kind of insane to even consider. But I think that's probably the most science fiction and therefore the most like true to Elon's vision of what this will all become. So I definitely think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy to think about. Yeah, we can jump into some risks here. We've talked about a few of them, but
yeah. Obviously, a lot of text on this slide. I think there's quite a few risks. I feel like xAI is one of the companies that we've the most among the companies we've talked about, the most kind of like up and down in terms of having, incredible upside and also all these, kind of potential risks or potential issues. And one you've talked about, obviously, is this kind of the math around the amount of debt they've raised and what that sort of implies, what they need to do on the revenue front to make it worth it. I think, yeah, a lot of that stuff is really the most kind of salient risk for them. I think another one is this kind of lack of a big partner. OpenAI has Microsoft, Anthropic has Amazon now, and so they're sort of limiting their own upside in a way by spreading out the usage and costs with these hyperscaler partners. But it also is a good way to protect their business, because OpenAI and Anthropic don't have to go and try and build a massive GPU cluster. So there's a bit of a risk here because xAI is taking on all that for themselves, which requires then the insane spend on GPUs.
Yeah. I think that's pretty well said. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle the burn. See if they can. I don't think they're ever going to decrease it, or at least not anytime soon when they're trying to compete and keep up with everyone. But they can definitely expand on the revenue, right? So I think locking in some revenue will be a very good sign for xAI if they can do that in the coming couple of months. But Jan, I really appreciate you taking the time. That was a very well thought out and a great little deck you put together. If you guys are watching and you want more, check out Sacra's research at sacra.com. Easily the best private market breakdowns out there, in my opinion. Definitely not biased. And swing by augment.com to explore some private market deals. And so, follow our socials for Sacra and Augment. We got some newsletters, LinkedIn, and the whole thing. So, Jan, thanks again. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. And may I say, great questions from you and from the audience. A very educated, very smart audience you have here. So,
I love it. Everyone killed it. I appreciate it. I think writing on the Pulse, which is Augment's newsletter, gave me a good little research lead going into this one. It was all about Grok. So it worked out well.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Jack.